we have part 2. So of course, if you're just now joining us, we're getting into putting our lines and manipulating them and adding context in Photoshop. Sweet. So let's go ahead and make a new file. In our case, again, I don't know why my default's always pixels. I've never used just pixels, I've always used inches. But anyway, that's a really big drawing, 2,000 inches. Anyway, let's get 11 by 17. A resolution of 72 is pretty much a default VGA screen. That's definitely not what we want. We want something of a higher quality like 4K, so usually about 300 pixels per inch. Now, if you notice your computer is really struggling, guys, 250 is better, 200 is not great, but it'll still print fairly well. If you squint a little, the blurriness starts to go away. But 300 is definitely useful, and you know, the school computers, for the most part, the newer ones should be able to handle 300. So we'll go ahead and create that, and quite literally just drag and drop it from our Illustrator file. So that is actually already pre-selected. I'll basically need to shorten my windows a little bit. If you have a double screen, this is of course a little bit easier. I simply just drag and drop it. And of course, use it now in Photoshop. Now you'll notice that it came in as a vector smart object, just like I predicted. And it's not really manipulatable, right? So if I get my move tool, I mean, technically manipulatable, but not, you know, individual lines or the colors or anything like that anymore. Technically, it is a rasterized image. And you'll see that it actually rasterized to a 300 pixel density. So like if we take a look at our diagonals, they're definitely pixelated now. However, if you want that pixelation to go further and further away, the higher and the higher DPI that you use, of course, the more crisp these lines will get. Now, to be fair, since it is a Cartesian plane, our straight lines look really nice and straight because, well, not much change from the vector to rasterization for a vertical or horizontal line, obviously. But as you can see, I can no longer actually go in and change the color, so that is important. But what's nice about this program, and I will treat it, I know for some of us, I haven't really gone over Photoshop. It may be actually even your first time in Photoshop. So I do want to remind you that there are a lot of Photoshop tutorials at the top on our Miro board. Of course, hopefully some of you guys have been using even the Rhino links, 2D and 3D, but of course we have some Photoshop links as well, particularly going over the quote-unquote manual method that I'm referring to. So let's actually do that first, and then you know, use some AI to see if it's any faster than doing this manually. So how we would do it manually, and of course even my graphics students probably know this one, is we can use the magic wand tool. In our case, it's the letter W. So if I hit the letter W, it enacts this tool. But right now, if I do that, it's on Object Selection Tool, which is cool, but to be fair, it has no idea what it is, right? And if it was like a photo of a person, it is pretty cool. It works pretty well, but you guys know in architecture, we don't really work with people so much. I mean, it's kind of a bigger question. We work with people, but we don't take photos of them. Anyway, and in our case, the AI doesn't exactly know what is and what isn't anything, right? We know this is a stair, but you know, to the computer, it's like, it's a gray box, dude, right? And it's closed, right? Just like we learned in Rhino, the amount of parameter information that's in that. Anyway, so we need to right click and check the magic wand tool. So that's pretty useful. So if I click on this and I click on a certain area, well, it actually gets that area for us as long as it's closed. You'll notice that I can do that for the sky, right? And I can get all that background area. And we can go ahead and do this manually. So, well, let's do that first. I don't know about you, but I like to go Bob Ross style. And if you've ever watched Bob Ross, he definitely starts with the background and moves his way to the foreground, right? So in our case, I like to start with the sky. And again, I'm going to be doing this manually. And as you can see, it's going to take a little bit longer. And immediately, I kind of want to show you with AI, right? So at least the manual situation, I'm going to have to go to Google. I'm going to have to type in sky materials or perspective. I'm going to have to waste some time actually trying to find the right one. You know, I do want something that looks a little bit more like an elevation. That's actually pretty good that the first three are, well, I don't know what that is, but oh, I guess it's a perspective diagram. Anyway, that we get something relatively flat that is usable, right? Don't get me wrong, the manual process can be a little bit difficult because, well, you actually have to find the exact situation. However, it does train you a little bit, right? As if you will. Anyway, you can definitely see what is useful and of course what's not useful. I shouldn't have just clicked on it. Of course, in my case, I'm going to right click and open image, usually in a new tab. Since that's not an option here, oh, there it is. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Something a little bit more useful that I can easily just drag and drop. And as you can see, it's not a high quality image, but not too detrimental for at least the manual process. As you can see, I'm going to just take that image, I'm going to transform it and get it pretty close. For instance, kind of get that line a little bit. I'm going to end up blurring this quite a bit anyway, so if it's pixelated, it's not the end of the world. I guess in this case, the image actually does look like the end of the world. And in our case, I can actually put it behind. You'll notice in Photoshop, and I know some of us are new to Photoshop, that the layers on top are actually on top in sort of the UI. So if I put it towards the bottom, of course, those are going to be at the top of the page, and I'll be able to see it, quote unquote, on the top. And as you can see, I just want the sky portion. So I'm going to basically kind of line up my ground a little bit and make sure that my sky gets all the way in there. And again, this is kind of to show the tedious process of what we've been doing for arguably probably about the last 20 years, right? Since that we've started to use more digital technologies in architecture. I don't want to get rid of too much of the scaling of my clouds, but that's actually looking pretty good. Now, I don't need all of it though, right? So in my case, I'm going to hit the letter E and to start erasing what I don't need. I can hold Shift to always make a straight line, which is nice. You know, that's pretty universal. Pretty universal in Photoshop and Adobe programs. But if I want to obviously not take all day, I'm going to hit the letter E. I'm going to right click on the image. Usually I want 100% because I want it to erase 100%. You'll notice what it does if I, like for instance, say 0%, and of course make this a little bit bigger. It's more of like a fuzzy line, and again, sometimes that's useful, especially maybe at the horizon right here. That way it's kind of blended into my topography situation. So don't get me wrong, there is some advantages of manually doing this because I can really dial in the exact look, or you know, even leaving some mistakes can actually give it more of a Toy Story 4 look, right? That sort of haphazard human look to it, if you will. I kind of leave that, you know. Sometimes I do, right? Because very often when I do these things, they look often too digital, too finished, too refined. And I do want to kind of add a little bit of human air to, again, match the drafting abilities that I would normally do this. However, with the sky, I do want a little bit of blur, so filter, and I'm going to add a little bit of Gaussian blur. Why is it called Gaussian? I think it comes from the guy who kind of coined that term. So we'll go to blur, or Gaussian, sorry. I know it's kind of pronounced two different ways, but in our case, I want to make sure it's on the sky layer. And if you have preview enacted, you can kind of see what that's going to do. Hopefully actually blur out our image. That's a bit too blurry. But again, I want to push it towards the back, and just like Bob Ross would do, he'd start to move the brush back and forth to kind of fuzzy it out. But yeah, to be fair, the sky, not too bad. So how would I do that in AI? Let's show that real quick. Well, first I need to tell the AI where do I want it, right? In our case, I do need to actually select all the pieces that, of course, will have this. And to be fair, I could just generate some images of the sky, but as you saw, you know, it can be kind of a selective process. So in my case, I'm going to use my magic wand tool. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the vector layer so the computer knows what I'm trying to trace. And I'm going to click in any element that is my sky. So I may need to be a little specific here. May need to get in there and go, well, yeah, that's actually see-through. You'll be able to see the sky. You won't be able to see that because the wall's in the way. So I do need to be somewhat make some decisions, right? I need to kind of look at it and go, well, that's not the sky, right? Don't select it. That is the sky. Do select it. Oh, wait, this is open. That's not going to work. I'm going to have to go back and erase that. So again, it definitely is a helpful thing to finish your drawing, not like I'd have for the sake of time, where things are quite unfinished. But we'll make the best of it. Now the trees are definitely the hardest part for this situation. There's a lot of holes in trees sometimes, so I definitely need to get each of those pieces. But let's at least test it. Let's see what it comes up with. Now in our case, it's going to be right here in your toolbar. It's going to say Generative AI. You're going to be able to do a couple of things, and if you hover over these, they actually tell you what they do. So like modify selection, I can invert the selection, I can create a mask from that selection. Again, really useful tools for all these pieces. But if I click on Generative Fill, I can say sunset sky in elevation material. And what's interesting about this too is I can control the amount as well. So let's see what Generate does first and see what that produces for us real quick. Keep in mind, I've never actually done this live before, so it could be a big nothing burger that I need to practice a little bit more on, and as you can see, a little bit of a nothing burger that clearly I need some more practice on. But what's nice is it actually creates a mask. It didn't really do anything to the drawing. It didn't ruin anything. But as you can see, it kind of used the drawing, and it really made some weird things, right, to say the least. I can disable this masking layer and, of course, actually go back to a normal, right? And as you can see, it's really just kind of additive. So let's figure out a little bit of what's going on. Obviously, the manual way is definitely the easier way in terms of simplicity. Right, but let's figure out what happened here. That's pretty wild and definitely not what we want. I'm just going to delete that altogether. That's awful. So let's try something else. Let's try that selection tool and actually apply it to its own layer. That was actually applied to my vector smart layer, and it may have been taking actually all that information. So I'm going to call this AI Sky, and that may be what I have forgotten. So again, I'm going to use that so I can make a better selection, and I won't use all that time for the sake of tutorial. But let's see if we can get that sky material working for us. Now, I'm not going to put it on my vector layer. I'm actually going to make a new sky layer. And in my case, another thing that I can do to maybe make this a little bit easier is to go ahead and brush actually in a color. It is something that I've learned while practicing with this as well. So I'll take my brush or the letter B. I'll right click so I don't have to be sitting here brushing all day. And to be fair, I like to brush more at a low percentage. That way there is kind of actually a fuzziness to it. I'm going to use maybe a light blue so that it at least looks somewhat of a matching color. And go way big. Shoot, 1,000 pixels? Let's go for it. But to be fair, even something like that is manual and quite easy. So it's not like we have to use AI all the time, but it is interesting. And if it can save us time when modeling, especially in the professional world or in studio, I mean, why not, right? Try and at least use it. So let's go ahead and try that again. What's nice about this is I can really deselect this layer and make sure that this is the only thing selected. I can even arguably go back to my magical wand tool. I can select the white space, and I've actually selected the white space, so in my case I can invert, right, my selection, and it'll select the opposite. So let's go ahead and try that again with a sunset sky. I'm going to go ahead and type in material. That does seem to usually work a little bit better, but let's try something simpler first. After all, it went kind of crazy. Now keep in mind what's nice about at least this particular AI guy, it's free to you and it comes with your Adobe Suite collection. Again, not exactly. It seems to be not in the right area. What's weird is that it did mask it though. So, let's try that again. Let's select the inverse. Maybe I did have the wrong piece. I don't know. For me, to be fair, when I select the inverse, they look absolutely the same to me. So let's try that again. And it does take a little bit of time. It is based on the internet and a little bit of processing. But what I was trying to say is that actually you have a free 1,000 credits. I might actually be able to work with that, just taking in my background. But it's definitely not the piece that I want. That's for sure. So I don't know. I definitely maybe just need a little bit more practice, or just not remembering what I did at home. So I do apologize. But as you can see, well, I've actually gone over 3 ways. The manual way of just taking, of course, another layer and materializing it. And, of course, just brushing it in. Let's actually go ahead and take another try, actually, at this. Let me try something else. Let's take that vector image. Undo it. Still got my AI sky layer. Delete layer. And another trick that of course we use is actually just straight up generate image. So in my case, well, maybe I don't want to find that on the internet. So you'll notice that this one should of course work because it's not based. I was trying to do it in real time on the reference drawing that I'm using. However, you can actually make these sort of like your own Google search engine, if you will. So in my case, sunset, beach with purple tones. Sunset in there, yep, sunset, beach with purple tones in sky and little clouds. I'm gonna go with maybe not the material texture, flat image. I do want it to be a little bit photorealistic. I could put a reference image, so for instance, if you already have clouds and skies, you can get it kind of dialed in close, right? And you could even further use your imagery. You could even do a sketch. So sometimes this generative image, of course, found at the bottom, can be a little bit more useful. However, it can, and I will figure it out how you can apply it to a specific section of your drawing. I thought I had it, I didn't got it, but we'll try again next time. However, I definitely know this works. If you just go to generate image, of course, this is actually where using your vocabulary becomes that much more important. And to be fair, at the convention that I just went to, I started to learn that, well, this is actually going to make us a little bit stronger in terms of how we describe things, how we, we're not going to use bed and, all these ridiculous words and terms to, of course, get a point across. So maybe even the vocabulary will increase for our students. So I'm going to choose photo, reference image. I can even choose an effect. So, if I wanted it to be cartoonish or black and white, we could definitely start to do other things. One of my favorite is actually layered paper. I think it's in here. If I passed it, please let me know. Because there are a lot of styles in here, right? We can go graphic style. I've never tried ink, but for a sky, that's probably horrible. Layered paper, definitely my favorite. Let's go ahead and see what it generates. It does seem like it takes forever, but if you time it, it's about 12 seconds, at least on this computer. Much better, right? Definitely something that I could probably use and even put in the background. And I was selecting the wrong piece. Oh wait, maybe that's just that piece. But as you can see, we can even start to use that. And to be fair, I'm never going to find anything like that on the internet. And it came from the text and that purple tone and color. I can still, of course, further manipulate it. And to be fair, I need to probably make these a little bit more easier to read. You probably can't see that so much on the projector. So check this out. We can take, again, that magic wand tool, and we can go ahead and start making these a little bit more opaque, right? Especially this whole section here, and that might be easier of just painting it white. So in my case, I'm a fan of making new layers and of course being organized. So in my case, I want to stick to walls. I'm just going to brush it in, right? It doesn't really matter what color I use because I just want to be able to see that a little bit better, right? And make sense of it. In my case, that might be way too much. I really want to dial that back. Now it's looking a little bit more graphic. Anyway, something I failed to mention in this graphic review is actually producing 4 of these. I accidentally just selected the first one that came about, but let's actually look at the other things that it generates. I don't know. Let's try an urban environment. Maybe even San Antonio. You know, I've never tried that. Elevation view with sunset sky. I'm going to go with the reference image again. Something that, again, kind of is akin to what I'm looking for. So, you know, if I found a cityscape in here, probably not a bad idea. Effect. Again, I would try actually a couple of these things. To be fair, I'm only really teaching you guys first. You guys are kind of my guinea pigs for this. So let's see what you produce. What I'm trying to say is I'm not going to deduct you if it's just awful, right? I do want to see you experiment a little bit with this because to me it's actually quite useful of information. Is it even fun, right? Is it even useful? Those are the kinds of questions I'm asking these days. Yeah, you know, I don't think this spot exists in San Antonio, but hey, we could probably fool somebody who's not and doesn't live in San Antonio. To be fair, we can even compose those two to be a little bit a part of each other. But what is interesting about this is normally I would have taken this from Google anyway, right, and manipulated it. So essentially, it's a different kind of search engine, right, using a collection, a model known as Adobe Firefly 3 in order to produce this. And actually something nice that I learned about at the convention as well is it's already been removed of kind of the possible legal situations or plagiarism, right? So they've actually curated their model and such to where you're not going to run into a licensing or copyright issue of, say, Coca-Cola, right? For instance, maybe you accidentally use their exact same font or possibly, you know, I don't know, some crazy patented Pantone color of some kind. Obviously something that students aren't really worried about, but definitely something to address. However, let's end it on a good note. I'm not a huge fan of the cityscape. I definitely am going to probably go with this side. So I want to transform that a little bit and make it useful. So just like I did to my Google image, I'm going to line up some of my drawing and get rid of some that I don't need, right? So I can take this piece, hit erase tool. In my case, I may need to rasterize the layer. Like I said, this is actually 4 different images right now, so I may need to actually flatten this image. As you can see, yeah, definitely need to flatten it. It's going, hey, do you want to discard all those other pieces I made? Well, I guess let's take a look at them first. Properties, and here it is, right? It actually made, it should have made 4. I guess it only made 3. But to be fair, I do like that one the most. Maybe we can see it a little bit better. Yeah, that looks a little too toyish, a little too cartoony, but again, this may be something I'm going for, especially if I'm trying to convey, I don't know, I'm doing a hotel resort in Miami Beach. You know, I'm not going to use dark emo colors, I'm going to use bright and sort of bubbly Venetian colors to maybe get the culture aspect of that across. So again, maybe layered paper style is not the way to go, but I don't know about you. Maybe I've been watching too many kids shows these days. With my children, but there's something quite happy and bubbly about that, and I would say is probably most successful in the first one. However, I could keep generating over and over this prompt, right, and using different reference images or even put in my own stuff. So you know what, next time I'm just going to do a tutorial about doing this a little bit better, but let's save it while we can. So let's make that a little bit less, and of course just get rid of what we don't need. I think 33% was pretty good, actually, the way I had it. Yeah, not too bad. But let's go ahead and get our lines back and erase some of that. In my case, yeah, I do need to rasterize the image because, as you guys saw, there's like 3 different images in there. So it's like, hey, which one are you talking about? Flatten image. And it's going to go, hey, are you sure you want to discard those other 2? Yes. Oh, well, not all of it. So make sure you don't merge your entire image. In my case, you can just merge visible. Right, so I'll merge it with my background actually. And merge visible. Sweet. So now that's actually a part of my background. Don't really need my sky. I want to get my vector lines and unlock it so that I can erase it. Right, obviously, well, I'm getting sort of the transparent background thing. That's okay too. I don't want to be here all day erasing things. Well, hopefully, I'm hearing some clicking in the back. Hopefully you're already starting to get started and test some of this out. But I could simply even remove this from what I don't need. I could make it a little easier on myself, right? Get some of those pieces and actually erase it only from that spot. So that's kind of nice, right? I don't have to worry about accidentally getting a piece I don't need. So just using that magic wand tool, of course, fill that in. Now, right now it's sort of the checkerboard background. So what I like to do is get maybe that background layer back. Oh, where'd it go? There we go. We'll type a white background. I'll go ahead and deselect, so Command D. I'll take that white layer and basically just fill it in. You can brush it, you can do all kinds of things, but let's go ahead and show you at least the fill bucket tool, if I can remember where it is. Where is the fill bucket tool? Sometimes these programs do change, right? So you definitely want to get familiar. Basically what I'm doing right now is just right clicking on each of the tool sets, and yeah, they've definitely added some tools in 2025. Fill bucket, did I pass it? There it is. So we'll control it. We'll make it just, simple white background. Voila. But yeah, definitely something kind of interesting. Now, of course, hopefully later, I'll start talking about how we can materialize some of these things. But use a little bit of generative AI, right? Especially instead of maybe that Google search and the long searching of finding the right one. Maybe it's a little bit more unique, dare I say creative, to prompt your own, right? Based off of a basically more advanced search engine. So anyway, just to kind of recap, we definitely went over the line drawings and clipping plane in Rhino, and to, of course, manipulate and dial these in first. As you can see, it can lead to a lot of issues in Illustrator and Photoshop, especially when things aren't closed, right? So for instance, taking that line and making sure it's closed. Anyway, right, definitely helpful. So we definitely went through that. We went through, of course, dialing in the line weight in Illustrator, quite literally dragging it into Photoshop, and starting to add some of that context. Now, obviously, we'll have a part 2 and even a part 3 of this. Maybe we actually try it on the floor plans as well. To be fair, I did give a disclaimer that this is my first time going live with generative AI, so I do apologize that it was a bit wonky, but hopefully helpful, because if you just type in architecture generative AI in YouTube, there's not much yet, right? So it is a relatively new system. And of course, architects are quite conservative with their tools, so they'll use the same tool for about 10 years until it just absolutely becomes obsolete. So we're kind of working with and against the profession, if you will. So anyway, any major questions that came about? I know there was a lot covered. Anything that came to mind? Anybody write down any particular questions? If not, I will go ahead and end the recording. Sound good? All right.